Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Quisha King Show. Today, I have a very special guest. She and her husband of 15 years live in Utah with their 3 children, and she is the content specialist for Utah Parents United. She seeks to expose the sinister agenda behind social emotional learning, for some of us know it as SEL. Behind those programs so she can help save the hearts and minds of our children and the next generation. Welcome, Lisa Logan, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me, Quisha. So glad to be here.
I am so happy to talk to you. So I guess we should tell everyone we have a secret girl crush. Well, I certainly have a girl crush on you.
Oh, sweet. I feel the same about you.
Thank you. We met in DC and we had just some really good talks, sort of away from everybody behind the scenes, just kind of like almost like in our jammies, braiding our hair,
just way to do it.
Right, just bonding as parents, as mothers concerned about our children. And I am so excited to talk to you, just like I was excited to talk to you then, and even, just meet you and find out all the wonderful things that you're doing in Utah and around the country. So please, tell us a little bit about yourself and, what you got going on.
Well, it's funny, before the show, it's real life, right? We're running around trying to get our kids to school and figure out Christmas parties for today. And I'm sure by the time your audience views this, it'll be way past Christmas. But but really, we're just moms, and that's the thing. I'm just a mom, and I think all moms and all parents in general should be really interested in what's going on in their child's education. And I started to go to board meetings and think about what's on the agenda and what are they talking about and what kind of programs are they implementing at our child's school. And that's kind of how I got involved in all of this. So, at the end of the day, I am just a regular parent. But my whole world's been kind of flipped upside down with this stuff. And I never thought, if you would have asked me 6 months ago if I'd be doing podcasts or I'd be on television or any of that stuff, I would have said, like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But it just so happens, I'm not a super religious person, but I believe in God, and I believe God gives you skills. And I've been in kind of an investigative journalist my whole life. I'll study silly things like, I know all about the O.J. Simpson trial. I know all about the JFK assassination, but I dig deep. And so, and we'll talk later. I'm not sure if I know who did it in any of those cases, but anyways, so really when social emotional learning and the stuff behind it came across my lap and I started digging, I just got more and more and more concerned. And it's kind of like a big wake-up call, right? You kind of going along in your life and you think everything's cool, and then you're like, what a second, what's going on here in our education system?
Right.
And so what kind of tipped me off, Quisha, was that in the agenda, there was 2 words, implicit bias and microaggressions. And I kind of, I'm a podcast listener, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I was like, well, I kind of know those 2 terms are associated with like critical race theory tenets, the fact that people believe implicit bias is the belief that if you're white and you exist in this system that they believe is racist, that you're automatically want to keep that status quo and are racist toward people of color. And microaggressions isn't like, saying, gosh, well, you're really articulate. And they, people start to think, well, if they're a person of color, well, what do you mean I'm not articulate? I wouldn't be articulate, because of it. So it's all these different little things that kind of baked into the whole critical race theory narrative.
Yeah.
And so when I figured out that they had started this program at my children's district, that was called Second Step, I started digging in. And the first thing I saw was this transformative social emotional learning they talked about on their website. They had this anti-bias and anti-racial page on their website. And I was like, well, what's this? And what's CASEL? So it kind of started me down this road of looking at social emotional learning, what the agenda was behind it. And it is much more sinister and scary than I ever thought it could be.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when you did your presentation, I thought it was honestly one of the best that I had seen because it was so, you when you're in this space, you hear these terms like all the time, you see presentations, you hear people talk about it all the time, you listen to podcasts, but yours I was learning new things and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is really terrible. And I mean, it's always like that. We know it's bad. The more you dig, it's worse than what you think it is. And so I really appreciate, that God-given talent of you wanting to dig and investigate and, figure out what's going on. Thank God for people like you who have taken the time to really dig into these things. I wanted to talk about briefly, when we were talking earlier, we're like running around behind the scenes. We are, we have children. We are, wives. We are, we don't have nannies. We're real moms. If there's like snot and all kinds of, mommy, I don't feel good, and stomach aches and all those kind of things, like, we're wiping noses and we're giving Tylenol and we're trying to, really yes, and so when people call us, they're like, they're not real parents. It's so insulting. It's like, excuse me, coming from people who probably have like nannies and au pairs or something crazy, so it's just a little annoying sometimes. But back to your work. So when you started to speak up at the board meetings, like what was the response from the board? What was the response from other parents? Like, can you share some details on that?
I was kind of a lone ranger at first, Quisha. I was like, where are the other parents? Where did they go? Isn't anybody else at this board meeting? It was like crickets.
So did you like look around and like everybody left the room?
I was like, okay, there's the people that's going to talk after me about whatever they're going to do here in the district, but where are the parents at? And that's, I mean, honestly, that's the beauty.
Really quick,
about what you're saying, though,
like those, it's like they do it in movies sometimes. They're like, yeah, and we're gonna fight, and we're gonna do this, and then slowly, like as you start naming everything you're gonna do, like people just start walking away. You're like, oh.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I was just saying that's the beauty of this whole thing that's going on, right? I mean, it's not just, and I will tell you what I've been saying in the board meetings, but when I started, there was hardly anybody. And the beauty about this movement that's going on right now is that parents are waking up and parents are showing. I mean, at one board meeting, a couple board meetings ago, we had the whole boardroom filled and we had 2 overflow rooms. Nice. I mean, that is like unprecedented, right? People don't see that. I mean, this is like parent involvement to a new level. But really because we're concerned about our babies, right? We're concerned about their future. And so when I started coming, it was just to get them back into school, honestly. And there was a huge movement around that, but I think that kind of was what awakened parents, right? The fact that they were home and quarantined and they got to see what their kids were learning. And so I was alone and the only person researching this for a long time. I think maybe there was pockets of people across the nation. I found them, through other parent organizations. But I started bringing up the fact of CASEL, right? So CASEL is the organization that sets the 5 core competencies that all SEL programs are measured against, right? So they're like the gold standard, and they basically rank SEL programs based on kind of the boxes they tick in what they want to do with SEL. And so in 2020, amidst the pandemic and the racial riots and everything else, they kind of quietly updated their standards and said, okay, well, now we want to have transformative social emotional learning, which is social emotional learning done through an equity lens. And they're white papers for the last few years, and they've been basically kind of cooking this up for a while. But they had this initiative from 2019 to 2021 that they wanted to start building this racial equity lens in their social emotional learning, and that would be the whole purpose of SEL. And so their white papers sound like the Communist Manifesto. They talk about wealth and whiteness and dominant US culture. And I mean, it's just, of course, all of the critical race theory concepts you hear, right? Systemic racism, everything's built to hold down people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what they wanted to accomplish. And you think, oh, SEL, and this is what makes it a perfect Trojan horse for this stuff, is that SEL is meant to teach kids things like empathy and perspective taking and goal setting and things like that. So parents are like, great, those are skills I totally want my kids to learn.
Right. Right.
The school's going to teach them that for me. And I'm just going to, I'm a parent and I should be teaching my kid these things, but great, the school will supplement them. But no, that's not what this is about. This is about teaching your kid that they have power and privilege, that they should have, advocate and be social justice activists for particular ideologies. And so it goes far beyond just, be kind to people who are different than you. It's like, no, you have to accept if there's more than two genders, and you have to call people by their pronouns, and you have to do all of these things, even if maybe you don't personally believe in those things. Maybe you have come from a religious culture or whatever. But really they want to teach your kids these things in the classroom.
Yeah. That is so true. I think a lot of people think that, it's just something that they're teaching the kids. It's not really something that they're trying to make them do. And I think that's the part that a lot of parents miss. Parents know that when they hear what this stuff is, they know it's bad. Many times I think they assume that that's not really, that's somebody else's school, that's somebody else's kid. And the other thing I think that many of us miss is the activist portion of Marxism, the activist portion of critical race theory or queer theory or all of this stuff. It's not just, and Ibram X. Kendi says it all the time. Robin DiAngelo says this too. It's not enough for you to sort of know that there's racism. You have to actively do the work to tear down the racism, to tear down the system. And that part is where we get into some very, very dangerous territory. I mean, the ideas alone are dangerous, but that is how they get pushed into society. When they are actively doing the work to be an anti-racist, or whatever the term of the day is, that is where, in my opinion, that's the stuff that we really have to be, I don't want to say afraid, because I am not afraid of these people, but I think we have to really be concerned. That's where, to me, the focus needs to be, because that's the real part that's going to tear down society. If it was just an idea or just someone talking about something, that's one thing. But when you have people organized and strategically placed in these institutions and actively turning your child into an activist, that is a problem. And yeah, and I don't think that parents get that. I'm trying to figure out what is that tipping point that turns concerned parents into the activists against this stuff. Like, how do we make that turn for parents to get them to help them understand this is not just some idea, this is not just you know what I mean? Like, what would be your advice to parents who are maybe thinking like, well, it's just an idea, well, it's it's not my kid, somebody else's kid, it's not really happening. What do you think of that?
I think in my experience, and you probably remember this from my presentation for Freedom Works in DC. Actually, a parent from a parent group came up to me afterwards, and she said, halfway through your presentation, I had to look down and play with my phone because the stuff you're talking about is so disturbing. And what I was talking about that she was having such trouble with is the fact that they're going to use the whole purpose of SEL, right, is to draw kids away from the ideals of their parents and their families, and to teach them what they think these they want them to learn as far as government instilled values, attitudes, and beliefs. And so not only are they teaching them this in school, but they're also assessing them. So, you've heard of Panorama. It's been big in the news because attorney A.G. Garland's son-in-law was a co-founder of that company. Well, they put out SEL Assessments. And so they're having these kids taking surveys or assessments or whatever they call them, right? Every company calls them something different. Basically, they're measuring your kids' values, attitudes, and beliefs. And if they don't line up with what they think they should be, there's going to be this score that follows them from preschool to age 20. And when they talk about using SEL in the classroom, they're trying to say they're going to build this emotionally intelligent workforce of the future. And this really kind of goes into, okay, well, if we're going to be measuring these skills and these are going to be the things they're going to hire on, right? These soft skills, how empathetic are you? How inclusive are you? That's a scary thought, because if your child has religious beliefs because they grew up in a family with religious beliefs and they don't believe there are more than two genders, what's going to happen to their social emotional score? Is it going to go down? Are they going to be able to get into college? Are they going to be able to get a job? And I think that's where you get parents involved, as they start thinking, whoa, wait a second. They're going to be putting them in a box, right? You have to think or believe this way. Otherwise, you can't be a functioning member of society.
Wow. That is, I think that's a good point. I think maybe I'm asking these questions because I want to figure out better ways to get parents, more activated into this and more involved. And so, so when they look back, they're not saying, like, gosh, the country, the country's gone, and you're thinking you have all this regret because you're like, I could have done something and I didn't. And so I think that's something that I'll implement, when I'm having these talks, is the idea that we want to tell parents and kids at certain ages, it's not just about what's, that you're just filling out a piece of paper. Basically, you're not just filling out a survey, but this is to program you for your future. This is to probably cast you out of society. Hopefully that will, click with parents, just like that woman said, because it is heavy. It's a heavy thing to talk about, when you're talking, and this, like, you're talking about this stuff all the time. It can wear on you. It can wear on your spirit. And she's hearing about it for the first time, and you talk about this stuff day in and day out. She's like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to look at my phone. But, I think we have to keep talking about it so parents can get to that point and say, no more. I can no longer sit back. This is going to affect my child's ability to have a productive life. They're not going to be able to function in society. Have you ever seen that show, The Handmaid's Tale?
No.
Oh my gosh. So it's a show about this. It's like the country has split. So it starts in America, but the country has split in half. And there's this group of people. Funny enough, they are the sort of conservative ones. And they basically take these handmaids and make them have sex with the commanders to make children, because the world had become, or the country had stopped basically having children. And so they capture these women and put them into, it's like slavery, and they have to, bear children for the commanders. And I know that's really extreme, but when I'm watching this, I'm like, they try to make it people promote it that's the agenda of a conservative, but I'm like, you have no idea. That's actually it may not be to bear children, but it will be to cast out certain groups of society. It will be to the state. The commanders will have control over what you and your children are are able to do, how you can function in society.
Well, we're
So
seeing that right now. We're seeing that right now, Quisha. We're seeing that
exactly.
with the vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I mean, we're going to like have separate
Exactly.
bathrooms or separate. I mean, you can't do this or you can't do that. I mean, we're putting to get people in this other category. We see that with cancel culture. I mean, this is our society now. If you don't belong to the mainstream beliefs, then they're trying to oust you out of society.
Yeah, it's even like with the affirming, and you kind of touched on this before. If you don't say, it's like, again, it's one thing to say, okay, someone feels that they're trans. Personally, I think that is an adult decision. When you're talking about taking hormones, things that will permanently change your body, that's an adult decision. I don't think children should be making that choice. But if you're an adult and you want to do that, okay, fine. But it's like, you have to affirm the child. We have in Duval County this thing called the LGBTQ support guide. And one of the things that's most disturbing on this guide, on the bottom, it says every classroom, every student, every child, every day. And student is in the rainbow colors. And it's, so the agenda is to push this into every classroom, every school, every student, every day. I'm like, my God, if y'all could be that determined on math and science and reading, like, maybe, if you guys could have that same zeal for math,
it would be much better, right?
Right.
Would go way up.
Can we teach the kids to read? Like, can you have that much compassion for reading? Right. But it's like, they demand that you affirm. They demand that you fall, you come into agreement with these, with basically nothing. And I say basically nothing because the critical race theory, queer theory, they want to strip away from you foundational truths. It's this postmodern thinking. What do you really know? Like, all of, like, these things come from the majority of society. So how does that make it, so therefore it's wrong. So what do you really know? Is that shirt really black?
Well, it's like, yeah, they're blurring the lines with reality, right? I mean, that's I try to explain to people, because I think people get lost in the weeds, right? With critical race theory and gender theory, like Marxism. What does it all mean? What is it? How does it apply to what's going on right now? And I think, like, what you're talking about is exactly it, right? It's that everything is a social construct, right? For the Marxists, it's class. For the gender theorists, it's gender. And for the critical race theorists, it's race. And whatever these social constructs are basically things that are made up by society. Those are used to oppress certain types of people. And so if you can get people to question objective reality, then nothing's real, right? What, like you're saying, what is knowledge? What is truth?
Yeah. Vodi Bakum, he's like, he says it's like an ethnic Gnosticism. So I think I have this right, but not when Gnosticism is like to know something, right? Is that right? I think so. I probably shouldn't bring it up if I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think I'm right on that. I think it's like, but he's saying, what the point is you have to, in order to know these things, you have to be in the right ethnic group or the right oppressor group. You know what I mean? And because they have made up, now they have, what the funny thing is, and I just thought about this. They have been saying that, if you are in the majority of the society, you're wrong for even existing and thinking and doing and being in the world. But they are doing the exact same thing. So they're now creating their own definitions, their own ways to be and exist in the world, but they're not based in reality, like you just said. And can you imagine if we have a generation of children who have no foundation of what is real? I mean, that is untenable. That is psychotic.
Well, yeah, and this is the thing. It's like, what is our breaking point, right? Where, well, okay, guys or girls are believing they're the opposite gender, and then we have this whole new thing now called furries, right? Well, now they're
Yeah.
animals. And
Mhm.
now I've heard there's even a thing now where children are being plants. And you're like, where do we draw the line? And I think this is where it gets scary, right? Because then you think, well, could an older man, maybe who's a pedophile, identify as a younger man and say, but I identify as a young man, therefore what I'm doing is not against the law. And I think this is where we like, okay, where are we going to stop? Where are we going to say enough is enough? And we need to base this upon fact and nature. And, it's funny, they proclaim, all these people proclaim to be the party of science, and you believe science, but then you're like, wait a second, like one of the fundamental truths is you're born with a certain set of assets, right? And that's what you're born with, right? And so it's like, can you really fundamentally change your chromosome too? Like, can you really change your chromosome? You can change everything on the outside, right, to make it look like you're a certain way. But in essence, are you a different gender than you really are?
Right. It's so great. So I was having this conversation. I was on a Fox Soul, and we were talking about transgender in sports, and I kept going back to the fact that biological men are stronger than biological women.
Yeah.
You can do the whole hormone suppression thing. The fact still remains that you are a biological man or woman. And I am surprised that more women aren't speaking up about this, because as a woman, being a woman is much more than having breasts and certain body parts and, like long hair or, eyelashes or whatever. For people to just put on the outside stuff and not know what it really is to be a woman, because you can take it on or put it off, but it doesn't make you a woman. And it's so perplexing to me after everything that, all of this Me Too stuff and the patriarchy and all of this stuff. And then now you have biological men that are literally taking the title and saying, oh yes, I'm a woman now. You must tell me so. You must call me ma'am. I am really surprised that more women aren't speaking up about this. Do you think it's like a fear? Do you think it's like, what do you think about that?
I think so. I think in the culture we live in today, everyone wants to be, it's in the name of being nice and accepting and not wanting people to feel like they're outcasts in society. No one would want their kid. I mean, that person is someone's kid, right? But at the same time, we are undoing decades of work to get women's rights. I mean, I'm surprised more of the feminists aren't speaking out against this. I mean, there are a few. I think it's Naomi Wolf who's kind of been speaking out against this lately. But I mean, really, we're like, when women's sports, especially, they're taking the titles away from these women that have worked so hard to get these high-ranking titles, like in this recent swimming thing that happened, right? where for years they've been fighting to get these, really fast times, and in one afternoon, a male who identifies as a female took it all away. And I think we have to either, I mean, and I think there's ways to help these people exist in society and still have their own rights as well. But we shouldn't be, it's just like with Marxism, right? You're taking away to make things even, right? They want to make equal outcomes. You're always going to take away from someone else, unfortunately. And that's not fair, right? We live in the land of equal opportunity, but not equal outcomes.
Yeah. And, it's exactly why we have our Constitution, because it's built on the idea that you are allowed to exist in however you want to, as long as it doesn't
infringe on your rights. Right?
Yeah, thank you. Infringe on my rights. And they that's probably why they don't like America, and they don't like that, because that is that fundamentally rejects their whole premise, their whole idea is that no, you have to, this will be forced upon you. So there is no longer your how you want to live, and how you have your property, and you and yourself, and you as an individual, and me as an individual. That can't exist under Marxism. It can't exist under this woke theology. It can't exist under these any of these critical theories. And so I think that that's a really interesting point, that it bites right at their foundation, that because America is totally antithetical to their entire movement.
Mm-hmm.
It is why America exists. We've seen what Marxism has done, long before America came. We know what these ideas can do. And so, it's really fascinating that people, I was telling you before, there on Twitter, there was a woman kind of making fun of, Moms for Liberty and parents who like us, like, oh, you guys are so crazy. Like, oh my gosh, America's never going to be communist. It's like, girl, if you don't wake up,
Mm-hmm.
like, we are speeding to communism and not going north.
Light speed. Yeah. Light speed.
High speed.
And that's the thing. I think, and people try to paint us as hating other groups or whatever. I think, like you're saying, I think it's all about keeping our rights, and kind of swinging it back to SEL and kind of what I'm doing with that. I mean, the way to get parents to agree on this, right? I think we all believe that we have rights to raise our children how we see fit.
Yeah.
Right. So regardless of what side you are on, right, of any issue, right, you wouldn't want if you were on the left or if you were an atheist, you wouldn't want children coming to school and learning about God, because you'd be like, that's my job to teach them about God, or teach them that there isn't a God or whatever. If you believed in I don't know, whatever, right? Like, you want to have the responsibility to teach your kids values, and beliefs. And I think the way to get people to unite around some of these issues is to say, you know what, like, you're a parent and you have the right to raise your kid as you see fit. And it shouldn't be someone else making the definitions and telling your kid that they should believe X, Y, and Z, because that's not their responsibility at school.
Right. Yeah, 100%. In one of your slides, you had, I think his name is Yuri. Is it Yuri?
Resmanov.
Yeah. Do you remember the quote offhand, or that slide?
Well, basically, it's so he warned America. This is like back in the 80s, Quisha. This is like really, really long time ago. He did an interview. He was a KGB defector. So he came over here and basically was telling us, here is how the Russians are trying to take over your country, right? Which is kind of scary if you think about it. But basically he said, and this was, again, early 1980s, and we're now living in 2021, almost 2022, is that basically the communists weren't going to be taking over America through like physical warfare, but through ideological warfare, which would be called ideological subversion.
Right.
So basically what they would do is they would send people over here and get them involved in the education system. And then they would teach generations of children in the communist, Marxist, Leninist ideology. And if you do that for enough generations, you can take over a country.
Yep.
And this is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing right now. He also amazingly talked about how they would use a crisis to do it. And here we are after COVID. I think a lot of us, when you're in crisis mode, you're not really thinking critically about what's going on. And I think a lot of us kind of had our eyes closed to all the different ways they were sneaking this stuff in 2020. And now we're seeing
Yeah, absolutely. If he saw it back in the 80s, and these people were now, the children at that time had graduated from these institutions, we're now teaching children. So it's old to them, but it's new to us. So they've been at this for a long time, and that he could see it then, the psychological warfare that was going on. And I don't think we even realize as a country how lacking our education system was, because even then, even in the 80s and the 70s, we should have been able to see, to think critically enough to stop this, to say, wait a minute, like, no, this is wrong. Like, why are we saying this? But I think our education system had long been, sort of being dumbed down over the years, where, children were not, we just were not getting the type of education that we thought our kids were getting. I think a lot of times we, Americans, we have, prided ourselves on, the greatness of our country, which it is, and sort of glossed over the areas that needed much more work, and we didn't pay enough attention to our education system, which was like the most important thing that you could, it's. I think you have a quote too, by Hitler in your presentation, when he talks about, is it about educating the children, or just
so you said, he who owns the youth owns the future. And interestingly enough, by 1939, 90% of the Hitler Youth were part of the Hitler Youth Organization. And that was a way not only to draw them away from their families and to teach them all day long, which what our school does, right? But also to get their ideology into the family unit, because, and that's really the thing. At the end of every presentation, I always say, focus on your family, because the family is the thing that'll prevent your children from getting indoctrinated into a lot of these ideologies. Because if you're close to your kids and you're talking to them about this stuff, and they, we use the dinner table to talk about stuff like socialism and capitalism and free market system and this and that. And sometimes my kids are the best kind of tattletales on what's going on at school. Mom, there's an LGBTQ inclusion flag, even though it's written that there's only supposed to be American flags at school, in my classroom. Or, gosh, I had this lesson and it talked about privilege or power. So it's interesting, but really the kids' minds are so plastic, and they're so easily manipulated at certain stages of their life, right? When they're young, and they're in our care, right? The first 5 years are so important. It's really where a lot of their social emotional learning skills are formed. And then when they're teenagers, they kind of are a little bit more moldable as well. And so this is where you're seeing they're really kind of hitting them hard with these ideologies in high school and kind of late middle school.
Yeah. So how old are your children? Remind me.
8, 11, and 14.
Okay. So mine are 15 and 13. How are your kids, besides being like little, your undercover investigators, which I love. I think that's fantastic. I'm like, let's recruit them all. How are they handling it? Like, what do they think about all this stuff that's going on in schools, in the country? Or are they just kind of like, oh my God, I'm so sick of it?
Sometimes like, Mom, can we talk about something else? I have to actively, and I ask them about their days, and they're always kind of, I think especially the teenager, he's worried that I'm going to cause too much trouble for him at school. He's a freshman, and they don't want to be embarrassed by their parent making a stink at school. But I think overall, they know what I'm doing. I think they're really proud of what I'm doing, because they understand I'm fighting for them and for their future. I think one of the greatest moments we had over the summer was right before school started. And our health department was trying to put another mask mandate in place. And we had fought so hard to get it taken out in the first place. Yeah. And we had shown up to one of the county council meetings, and my 8-year-old, she had been suffering major anxiety at school because of the masks, wearing the mask. So like really, and you see this a lot with the kids who are wearing the mask. And I think I even kind of have more anxiety when I wear a mask and I'm out in public. Just because your brain kind of is like, I can't, if you wear it for too long, you're like, I can't breathe, like it feels weird on your face. You're not used to it. And so by the end of last year's school session, she some days was hiding under her desk, having like panic attacks. And it's so sad to hear that your child's going through that at school. And she kind of had a little break from the mass. It was like the end of summer, and we went to this county council meeting, and I was trying to show them how they were kind of padding the numbers of what the percentage of people were that had COVID in the hospitals, especially when it came to kids.
Yeah.
And she came with me one day and she's like, Mommy, I want to go up there and talk to those county council members. It was during the public comment session.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking of myself how much anxiety she was having. I'm like, honey, you don't have to do that. Like, I'm taking with you because I have to, because you have to watch you.
Right.
You don't have to go up there. And I wasn't even actually planning to speak that day.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, no, I want to. And my brave little girl who was suffering panic attacks went up there and was like, it's hard not seeing people's faces at school, and I can't see them smile at me. And, this is hard. Like, it's my baby.
Yeah.
She was saying how, she's like, carbon dioxide is for trees. And she's like, we're breathing our own carbon dioxide. And I was like, wow. It's funny. Like, she must listen to my conversations when I'm on the phone or whatever.
Right.
And, of course, the haters were like, oh, she prepped her child. And I was like, you don't even know. I was trying to get her not to go up there.
Right.
And when the county council finally did vote out that mask mandate, they overturned it. My kids were there holding signs saying, let me breathe. And the crowd saying the Star Spangled Banner. And you could just tell, like, my kids had a moment. And it's a blessing and a curse, right? What we're going through right now with our liberties being infringed upon.
Yeah.
It's hard that we have to fight for them, but it's so good for our kids to see that freedom isn't free.
Right.
And we have to fight for our freedom, and we have a civic responsibility to know what's going on in our cities and our towns, and to speak up when we feel like something's wrong. So
wow.
But anyways, I think they're proud. They're proud of what I'm doing. And I think even my 14-year-old, even though sometimes he's embarrassed, he's like, Mom, I know when you're old and too tired to do this stuff, he's like, I'm going to take over for you.
Oh my gosh, that is so sweet. Well, God bless you and your children. That is so awesome. That's so touching. My youngest, when I told her that, they weren't going to have to wear masks, she goes, oh my God, Mommy, I can be free. I love that. I mean, I don't think
Keisha, at the end of the day, we are just moms who care about our kids, right?
Yeah. Gosh, it's in the hustle and bustle of it all, even before, we got into this work, and I think sometimes you can forget, what it's like as a child going through all of this stuff, like not, the whole COVID thing, we haven't I don't think we've paid attention enough. Like some of these stories that I hear, children going through, like your daughter, hiding under a desk, and, you see children who are being like bullied by teachers, being called all kinds of names by teachers because they're not wearing the mask properly, or they don't want to wear the mask, or they're complaining about the mask, or whatever it is. It is, people have just gotten psychotic with these ideas. It's too much. And I implore all parents to, even if you want your child to wear a mask, okay, let's just say you want your child to wear a mask. You might want your child to wear a mask, but you clearly don't want them to have some type of mental illness. You don't want them to have some type of mental breakdown. Talk to your kids, like pay attention to them, make sure that they're okay, because along with, making sure we don't have a Marxist generation, a next generation, we don't also want children to be, mentally impaired, by something that could have been prevented.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, and that's the argument too with the social emotional learning, right? It's not just the fact they're trying to indoctrinate your kids. I mean, because that's bad too.
Right.
But they're asking them to share really sensitive information at school. And these teachers are not therapists. They're not trained therapists. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the truth. And then on top of that, they're getting to hyper focus on how they feel and their emotions. And I think over time, that creates we have enough things in our society, right? Social media that creates this like narcissistic society, right? Where they're like videoing every moment that they're having on Snapchat and Instagram, whatever. But then to have them hyper focus at school on their emotions, and really they should just be, it's funny, they say they're trying to teach them grit and perseverance, but that doesn't teach them grit and perseverance. That teaches them to feel helpless and to always be turning in instead of turning out, and looking at the world and being grateful for what they have. And granted, there are kids that really have troubled home lives and need extra support.
Absolutely.
And this is really what you were talking about. Parents should have the choice, right? Parents should have the choice of whether or not their kids should wear a mask. Parents should have a choice whether or not their kid can be vaccinated. Parents should have a choice on whether or not their kids should learn government values, attitudes, and beliefs, or their own family beliefs.
Yeah.
And so really, I think when we talk about parent choice in education, this is what we're talking about, right? Having the choice to live in your world and keep your freedoms and know where your lane is, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think many people got confused as to what we were really saying. If you want to do that for your family, and that's good, that's your constitutional right. All we wanted was a choice, because everything is not good for everyone, and for people who claim to be, the liberals are the ones for choice, they certainly did not like when we wanted to have our own choice. It was so baffling that, they were trying to make a lot of parents seem like we were, we wanted to mandate our beliefs onto them. And when we were just all we wanted was a choice to make our own decisions for our own lives, which should not even be a question. We have that right under the Constitution to do that. And so they use that a lot of times to demonize parents who knew that was not good for their child. It was not in the best interest of themselves, which their children are an extension of themselves. So, it's so upsetting to see where America has gone. This beacon, so many people have seen America as a beacon of hope, as an escape from communism, as an escape from Marxism, as an escape from tyranny. And you hear so many people from like Cuba, Venezuela, who are Cuban Americans, Venezuelan Americans, who have chosen to make this nation their homeland and are speaking up too, because they cannot believe that when they turn on the TV, it sounds like what they fled.
Yeah. And they recognize, they see what's going on. I had a friend tell me her husband's from Cuba, and she's not. She's like a redheaded, like a freckled girl. But her husband's from Cuba, and her husband and her brother kind of are on two different sides of the political spectrum. But when election night came and they stopped counting the votes in the middle of it, the brothers called each other and were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This happens in Cuba, and this is usually when sneaky stuff's going on in the election. And then actually, you mentioned Yuri Bezmenov, of all people. And he actually said in that same interview, he said, we have to be careful of this and watch out for this stuff coming in, because America is the last stop, basically. Like if we lose America, there's nowhere else to go.
Where do we go?
Where are these people going to flee to? Where are we going to flee to?
Right.
And you see all these stuff happening in Germany and Australia and New Zealand, and you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, that's a real question. If they get their way, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Where? It is. What's that?
I said, I wish I knew.
I know, right?
I would start making plans.
We some people like make fun of the preppers and stuff like that, but it's like, I think they're on the right track.
Yeah,
Better,
they may
what is it?
be.
Better to have an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
So true,
So
right?
we
Be
might want
prepared.
to take them a little bit more serious. So, Lisa, tell us about Utah Parents United. Did I get that right? Utah Parents United?
You talk parents.
Yeah, okay. And any your social media, any links that you'd like to share, I'll make sure to place them in the show notes and in the comment section. But please tell us where people can find you.
Well, I am on Twitter at I am Lisa Logan. You can find a lot of my work about SEL on the UtahParentsUnited.org website. It's on UtahParentsUnited.org/SEL for social emotional learning. And I'm also on Facebook at Lisa Logan as well. And it's a picture of a sunset with an American flag.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. What are your next plans? Like what do you have coming up? What can people be looking forward to coming from you and Utah Parents United?
Well, obviously the legislative session's coming up, so we're really trying to educate legislators to focus on transparency and curriculum. And so parents have we have a saying around here in our school district, the parents who are really rallying, we want the first look and the final say in all things education, because really the parents are the primary stakeholders. So we got that legislation coming up. My main goal is to make sure that parents understand the Trojan horse that social emotional learning is. I think people all over the country are talking about critical race theory, and that's fine. But if you don't understand what critical race theory is, and that, of course, we're not teaching the actual legal theory, but all the tenets that underlie it are in these social emotional learning programs, and they're trying to teach your kids to be social justice activists. So I am trying to go on as many podcasts as possible.
Yes.
Trying to inform as many journalists as possible. I just had a press release come out that talked about our work in our school district, that we actually got our social emotional learning program out because we showed them that it contained inappropriate sexual links, and it contained tenets of critical race theory, and it contained all these things. We actually got our school district to vote it out. So I'm actually have parents reaching out to me from across the nation. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Asking me, because Second Step is one of the most widely used programs in the nation. It's like 20.5 million students hear that program every year. And so I'm just trying to educate people, because really that's the next step. We have to get parents riled up and ready to activate and motivate their communities, so that it can happen all over the nation, right? Where they're getting these programs out, because it just stresses me when I open up the news and I see another district implementing SEL and another district implementing SEL. And I know that all of these kids are going to be indoctrinated, and we're slowly seeing our country slip through our fingers.
Yeah, you are so right. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. It is really, truly making a difference. I am so glad that we met, and so glad to get to call you friend, and we'll share whatever you have going on. So thank you for being bold and having the courage to do what you do, because it's not easy. This is not an easy job. It is not it's not easy to take the hits that we do every day. So I applaud you, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing more about you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Quisha. I really appreciate it, and good luck to your new podcast.
Thank you so much.